It is the boy. So I'm gonna talk about Black Myth Wukong because I believe that this game, well, people like to set unrealistic standards for games, and in this particular case, it makes sense because we live in this odd situation where games are not for gamers. So the very game you buy and the game you play for the sake of entertainment, that's not why it's being made. It's being made to either uh, get government grants, government money. It's being made to either get investor money, right? And when this happens, you see that there is a conflict of interest within the company to just release games based off arbitrary characteristics and checkboxes that don't benefit the consumer at either. And this could be for ideological reasons. Like the example I gave was like, well, I mean, it was with movies, but with Germany and how there were just a lot of poopy doo doo German knockoffs of popular movies because the German government was like, look, we'll give you a lot of money to, make movies that push German culture to the rest of the world. So you have this producer that just made shitty knockoffs, and he didn't have to make good movies. I mean, a couple of them were probably fine, but at the end of the day, the conflict of interest was just making projects. They didn't have to sell good or sell to people. People didn't have to like it. The incentive was just to make them, and I feel like games have also entered that sort of situation. But so you get games like Black Myth Wukong, which is just you buy game, you play game, the end. And, people will look at this and they're like, oh wow, holy shit, a game that's just a game. It's not trying to be a live service. It's not trying to manipulate you into playing more. It's just you buy the game, you play the game, you beat the game, and you move on, right? And there's an incentive to keep playing that one game that you pay up front just one price tag for, just to get either the secret ending or to play with different bills. Like that's where the incentive was. At least when I grew up, the incentive of having one game be worth the three, four, five games is increased difficulty. It's looking for secrets, right? It's playing with different builds or playing sometimes even with people for co-op. That's where the value of games are at. That's why, yet, despite games being worth $50, right? At the time, you paid $50, you got a $100, $200 worth of value out of that one game, specifically based on how you interacted with the game. But see, the problem is that's not where we're at anymore. They want you to pay $70 for a $20 experience, and they withhold most of the game from you unless you pay an extra $30. And then you pay, and again, it's value because people are willing to set money aside. Like, people are willing to pay $70. Like, we see this. People are willing to pay for entertainment 70, 80, 90, even $100. You see this with the first Descendant. Like, I mean, I paid $50 extra dollars for a free game because I wanted to tip the developers because I like the game. Now I know people who paid twice as much, three times as much, but got a third of the value because again I put $500 in the game, and this is where the value of the game, and to offset the cost of games, you sold merchandise, you sold shirts, like you sold physical tap that offset the cost of the game. But see, they can't do that anymore because they do not have faith in their product. Like, they do not believe the product will sell on its own merit. So they add ideology, they add social bullshit. They they mobilize the Twitterites online to defend the multi-billion-dollar company for because it adopts an ideology, and then you see that the consumer rejects this at all turns. And it will suck that legitimately good games are going to be passed over simply because these tactics are being done. And these tactics that do not benefit the consumer one bit, right? They only benefit the company, they only benefit the ideology, they don't benefit the consumer. And again, if good games are passed up because of this, it's a tragedy. But I don't want to make this about all of that, even though I spent like, I don't know, 5 minutes talking about it. This game is amazing, right? I'd give it a 10 out of 10. And I'm judging games based off the time and place they come out and what other games there are. Because there's very few games that are actually good. You have a lot of games that are, again, not meant to be played by the consumer, like Concord. So, and the thing I want to say is this is not a Souls-like game. It's like, oh, is it a Souls-like? No. Because I just don't think every single fantasy game with hack and slash and a dodge mechanic should be like turned into a Souls-like, marketed as a Souls-like. Like, it's Souls-inspired, I'll give them that, but is it a Souls-like? I wouldn't say so. I don't think it's a Souls-like. But does it need to be good? Fuck no, because it's more akin to like Kingdoms of Amalur: The Reckoning, or I guess a better comparison would be like God of War. So it's more combo-based fighting style as opposed to, you know, bonking and dodging and bonking again and dodging again. And I think that's an itch that's rarely scratched nowadays. And I'd say it's more like the Dawn of War Ragnarok, right? And I believe that's the reason why people like this game so much. Because, you know, let's be honest, people just want itches to scratch. And that's just about it. People don't want, you know, the same. And I think this game definitely gives you what you want. They definitely gives the player that itch to scratch. And the bosses, it throws so many fucking bosses at you that I like it. I'm like, hell yeah, brother, lay it on me. But the bosses have cool designs. Like, one of the bosses I liked was at the end of that pagoda. So it's like this walking quadruped with a spinning head, and it had fucking amazing design. Another boss that was cool was like the Rakasha King that you fight in like the last area. So it has some amazing. It also has some fucking annoying bosses, like the Thousand-Eyed whatever Taoist, I think his name was. And he's annoying because when he hits the fucking domain expansion and you fat roll and it cuts your stamina down by half or like a third, down to a third, and it's like there's a specific item to counter that, but I completely did not get that item, so I effectively shirt-cocked that entire situation. I was like, fuck it. And that was one of the bosses that took me quite a bit to beat, simply because I'd get him down to through his first phase easily, but his second phase absolutely fucked, right? And I do believe that's what made him annoying, but he was a interesting and good boss. I mean, one of the first difficult bosses was like the rat on the second area, the Yellow Wind King or something. And he was annoying. But he was annoying because he he casts his own domain expansion where you're in the middle of a tornado, and he can jump outside the tornado, but you cannot. So you're standing there like a fucking Grand Theft Auto NPC while the player truck is running towards you, and you need like that split-second movement to get the fuck out of there. And if you fail, oh, you get hit. So he's also annoying because of that. I had trouble with the Rakasha King, or the Rakasha guy, the red demon asshole. But that's because, I couldn't lock in. Like, I was too fixated. And not fixated. I was eating something, so I had trouble with him. And the final boss is probably the most disrespectful boss in the game, because one of his moves is when you drink your gourd, he literally just immobilizes you, take the fucking gourd, then drink it himself, and it heals his health, and it uses the gourd. I'm like, bruh. And it's things like that that are memorable. Like, they're annoying, but it's memorable, so it achieves its purpose, right? And again, you have your stances. One of the major problems people had was you keep using a lot of light attacks, and you use light attacks to build up focus, and with the focus you can use your heavy attacks, and you can heavy attack within your lights to have various things, and then you switch between your stances. You have the pillar stance, which you can avoid ground attacks and drink your gourd if you're high enough. You have the thrust stance, which kind of dodges you back out of shit. And then you have your pull through, like your that heavy stance, where you can keep attacking through enemies even if you get hit. And I think that's probably the most useful out of all of them, because when you're, and if you get it up high enough, you can just pull through and see through enemies, and you take less damage. But I think that one is just the most useful out of all of them. But each stance has its own way of going, like dealing with enemies, and I like the see-through one, but you can find uses in all of them. I think the pillar stance is again good for mobbing. The other stance, what is the other stance? When you use its heavy. The thrust stance is good for dodging back and dodging out of groups of enemies. So each stance has its own thing. You also have like your staff twirl, which I barely uses, but it's good for taking out range units, which is absolutely useful, because you have some with like fully repeater crossbows, and they can just keep laying into you. And if you get hit once, you're getting hit by all the arrows. And I know I talk about the combat's amazing, right? It is definitely funner to play than it is to watch, because if you upgrade your martial stance enough, when you dodge enemies' attacks, it doesn't break the combo. So you can still stay in the game. And some combos do not stagger the enemy, and it's that way on purpose. So you can, either see through, or you can dodge in between, or like there's certain things where if it has a perfect dodging system, which if you upgrade, it gives you focus, gives you more attack, gives you a lot of things. And there's things like that. It's that varied level of combat that makes the game hella satisfying. And a hell of a lot more satisfying than, even combat from Elden Ring has good combat, but people play Elden Ring for a completely different reason than they'd play Black Myth Wukong. Like, it scratches a completely different itch than Wukong does. But I think Black Myth Wukong is still, a good game, and they're good in their own respects. And I think because Black Myth Wukong is marketed like a Souls-like, it people assume you're gonna have the exact same experience, but no, Black Myth Wukong is hella different, and I like it. It's a different game that takes place in a different time, like different mythology. So I guess Chinese mythology, and it actually I think Dragon Ball, this Goku, his story is literally just the one of the story of Sun Wukong. But there is an actual Chinese literature called Journey to the West, and it pretty much tells Wukong story. And again, the areas are huge, and I try to comb every fucking rock, rustle every fucking leaf, but there's even things that go past me. Like, I had to play a game because I missed two strong bosses while I was playing through, and I'm like, I hate that because they're supposed to be strong, but I've technically already beaten the game, so I had to effectively nerf myself just to try having fun. And a lot of it requires you to go to areas you've already been, which is fucking annoying because I don't want to have to do. I don't like backtracking. I'm one of those people who hate backtracking, but for one of the secret bosses, you literally need to go back to the first fucking area, right, to find, and you need to beat him and the other two bosses that I've got to get the last boss. So that's something I do not like under any but it's in the game. It's fine. I'm not gonna fucking cry about it. But it is one of those things that's like, me annoyed, me very annoyed. But again, that it doesn't affect my score. It's just something that you have to do. It's just what it is. And the story's amazing. Like, I cannot tell you how awesome the fucking story is. Like, they should have more stories like that. Like, more games like that are just supposed to tell a story. They're not supposed to try selling you ideology or selling you anything else, right? More games should do that, but unfortunately, games nowadays just don't try. Like, they don't try to sell you an experience. They try to just exist to suck up government grants and government money, and people see this and they reject it at all costs. But it's just still something that is there. And, it's a shame, but it's just, there should be more games like Black Myth Wukong. Like, there should be more games that come out, that are good and that are enjoyable, right? This game does literally nothing different than what games used to do, but for some reason, it's like you're incapable of just making a game like this. So, and because of that, my grading system on games is harsh, but I definitely give Wukong a 10 out of 10. And again, it's because I'm judging games based off what came out in the past decade. Like, hell, I'd even say Elden Ring that came out in 21, 22 is also a 10 out of 10. And it's that way because it's a game that's just meant for gamers. If I want to judge it on games on the past, again, in the past it was a completely different era, a completely different time, and to me it just makes no sense to judge games based off games from a completely different time where companies could actually put in risk, like they'd actually, take risks, like they would risk offending, they would risk these things, but and because of that, yeah, you got some poo poo doo doo games, but you also got some fucking amazing games. And, again, because of that, 10 out of 10 would absolutely recommend, right? And again, the game has its flaws. Again, there's that thousand-eyed Taoist asshole who you have to attack his legs, but he's like in the body of a centipede. So you're swinging at his toothpick ass legs, and sometimes they would move and you'd whiff attacks. And then because you can't really get around him because the hitbox of his attacks is the size of Antarctica, you get absolutely blasted. That plus his fucking domain expansion. You had the Yellow Wind King, who had his bullshit. I wouldn't say the Great Sage was difficult, and yeah, you have bosses like the Yin Tiger that are is that, and that's another thing they did with the bosses. Like they will know what moves you do and try to counter you. So if, say, on the Yellow Yin Tiger, you went with your pillar stance, right? He will just grab you and you'll get fucking one shot. Because with the pillar stance, if you get up on your pillar, you can avoid most ground attacks, but then it'll activate his command grab and fuck you. Same thing with the Rakasha King. If you try using your pillar stance to avoid his bullshit, he'll just throw out range bullshit. And with the Great Sage, if you use your duplicates, your shadow cloned jutsu, he'll just fucking uses the ring of fire, or he'll use the rock salt abilities. Oh yeah, there's also spells, right? Because there's so much in this fucking game. You also have spells. You have an immobilization. You have a ring of fire. You can turn into various monsters. I use the twin-bladed rat thing a lot. You have your cloud step. You have your rock solid. You have so many things. You have the shadow clone jutsu that I use a lot in gank. And you can make some pretty damn good builds. Like, my build was the gank build. So I'd use, like, you could also use, like, weapons like veils. And they're also, you can use them along with other abilities. And you can also use transformations to also, like, if you take into consideration all the things you can do in Black Myth Wukong, you can have specific builds that you can work with. And these might not be readily apparent in the beginning of the game, right? Because again, some people hate the fact that you only really have few things to start out with, right? You only really have your lights to lean on. But if you haven't gone any further than the first chapter, I mean, I'm not surprised you don't really like the combat system, because so much more opens up towards the end of the game. Like, as you could go through the game, you get so much more shit that it's like that delayed gratification. You're always wondering, oh, what new thing I'm going to get? What new thing am I going to want? And, that's what makes the game good. That's what makes people want to play it. And I think that is a very, very good thing. And the level design, like, the third chapter was so fucking long. Like, I thought if all the other chapters are going to be as long as the third chapter, I'd just play ahead and just, and record just major things. But, again, the fourth and the fifth chapter wasn't as long. So I actually played ahead of certain things, and when I do the New Game Plus, and I'll absolutely show you the parts that were missed because I played ahead. And I'm also wondering what build, because I've used sort of just the same 2 or 3 things that fucking help, but I don't know, if I play through it again, I might play through with, I don't know, maybe a different set of spells, different types of monsters, just to really keep things fresh so I'm not just boring myself out. But amazing game, absolutely recommend. You just, I mean, again, I kind of looked at how other people graded the game, and usually I try not to do that because then what I say sort of coincides with what they said, and people look at that and it's like, oh hey, this is what this person said. So, I mean, but sometimes you just agree on the same things. Like everyone will agree that the um, Yellow Wind King was the first difficult boss because of his bullshit, and everyone will agree that the Thousand-Eyed Taoist is a fucking annoying boss if you don't find the one item. I still haven't found the one fucking item required not to avoid his goofy ass shadow, this fucking domain expansion. So, in that aspect, I mean, some things are just universally, everyone will agree that Black Myth Wukong it's not a Souls-like, it's more Souls inspired, and even though I think they marketed like a Souls-like, and again, 3 years ago they didn't market it this way, but then they did, and I think that's fine because it is inspired by Dark Souls. So I don't care, but I'd give this game a 10 out of 10. Like, fuck it, 10 out of 10. Fuck it, because there's so many games that are out that are just not meant to be played by gamers, and this game definitely is. But I think I said everything I wanted to say. It has a new game plus mode, so you can play through it again. But that's all I gotta say. Peace.